Hi, my name is Eduardo and I'm going to present the end of World War II. To start from the beginning of the end of World War II, we need to travel to the year 1945, when the bloody Battle of Bulge got to an end and the United States forces entered to the country of Germany from the west part. Allies were marching on the west in their way to conquer Berlin. All of this started in the date of June 6, 1944, when the Allies invaded France from Normandy. On the east, the Soviets were marching and by January they took Warsaw and they continued with the conquering. This date was known as the D-Day, where more than 160,000 Allied troops, half of them American obviously, 13,000 aircrafts and 50,000 ships supported the operation in Western Europe. This event was a turning point in World War II. While all of this was happening, there was a reunion of the Allies in Yalta to discuss about what will happen to Europe and specifically to Germany's split. Well, although by this time the victory of the Allies was imminent, they wanted to surrender the Axis powers to make a real success in the war. So they kept pushing their way to Berlin, bombing several important cities such as Hamburg and Dresden. As a response, obviously, Germany bombed London, but it was not as violent as the ones in Dresden or Hamburg. By April, the most important month, the end of the war, the Allies occupied most of the Axis territory. From the south of Italy, there was a huge advancement until Germany was spread into two conquerors. By this, Allies spread in Italy. They take Mussolini and gets executed in March. The Soviets take Berlin and by April 30, Hitler commits suicide in his bunker, in the middle of crying commanders and devastating bombings. Some other important commanders took also the same way, and by May 7th, Nazi Germany collapsed. In June 5 of 1945, the Allied leaders signed the Berlin Declaration in which they assumed the dominion of the German territory. Now we are going to enter a very important moment in the World War II, the Allied occupation. The first plan for the Allied Control Council was to rule conjointly over the entire German territory. However, by 1947, the Western zones, such as British, French, and American countries, began to standardize their own policies. Finally, in 1949, the zones unified as a Federal Republic of Germany and the Soviets. 5 months later, established the German Democratic Republic. A new ideological hostility was developing in Europe between the capitalist West and the communist East. The Soviet Union established a puppet government in countries such as Poland, Romania, Hungary, and Bulgaria. This called the attention of the Western leaders, and the United States responded by developing the Marshall Plan, a financial plan to help the Western European nations to rebuild and recover economic stability. The Marshall Plan handed over a total of $17 billion to the European cause, making it possible to rebuild and establish a free market capitalist economy favorable to the interests of the United States. Continuing with the war, several years before the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was established, Japan was a problem to the Allies. Japan, as an Axis country, refused to give victory, which led to the conquering of the island of Luzon and Manila at the beginning of the year 1946. By February, the Allies started invading more Pacific islands such as Iwo Jima, which caused several deaths in the Allied troops and over 19,000 deaths in the Japanese troops, of a total of 21,000. They took the island by March. By the time this was happening, the Allies were bombing the city of Tokyo, which was already destroyed by the way. Japan refused to give the victory and continued the war in Okinawa, which took a lot of civilian lives and a lot of Allied troops. The President of the United States, Harry S. Truman, worked in a project called Manhattan, in which nuclear bombs were developed. By August, the President Truman ordered the test of these bombs to accelerate the end of the war. The Enola Gay, and more specifically the Sergeant George R. Caron, launched the missile little boy to Nagasaki, hitting the city in August 6 at a time of 8:15 a.m., which killed 66,000 people and injured 69,000 more. 3 days later, in August 9th of 1945, Fatman was launched from a B-29 to the city of Nagasaki, killing 70,000 lives and more after discovering the radiation of the bombs. At the same time, the Soviet Union was invading Manchuria. By the 14th of August in 1945, Japan surrendered, and by the 2nd of September, World War II was over. The war ended with the victory of the Allies. I think that this period of time was extremely important for our psychological development here nowadays, because we can see the human being that has been disvalued from the history to nowadays. I think that this period of time was great to understand that nations or colors or something different from another one could be a purpose of a disaster. So we need to take account that leaders not always have the correct answer to our problems. We have to understand that human being needs to be united to be stronger and better. Well, there were some benefits from the World War II, like the Treaty of Paris in 1497, yes, allowing international countries to join the United Nations and expand the cost of the war and making great economic agreements. However, our world has been always very ambitious, and countries nowadays need economic support. And well, I think the United Nations was like the most positive solution that the World War II came to an end. So I think it's one of the most positive things we can see from this type of events. And nations now, I think they are more united than in that period of time. They can see for other nations, they can help them with economically, they make treaties, they help themselves in disasters. Well, there are very examples, there are a lot of examples to search for, but I think the most important thing of the United Nations is that it unites the nations, as its name says. It creates the world as a whole and not as a division of countries. I think it made this important change in our daily lives. We need to understand that we are in the same team and we are not separated by our ideals. That's the most important thing. Respect and tolerance between our human race.